Hello, everybody. Good
Hello.
morning.
Good morning.
Let's wait maybe 1 or 2 more minutes and just see if some stragglers come out. My announcement was a little late today, so hang on. All right, everybody. Good to see you. But by way of housekeeping for a second, I have had a lot of people ask if we could record these and make them available in case they can't come and attend these calls. And so I've been trepidatious about this because you guys share very personal things, and I want it to be a safe, bulletproof environment where you feel like you can share things in this fellowship, where it's not going to be, blasted out across social media and that sort of thing. And so, and then there are other components of this call where I think, it wouldn't necessarily matter if we sent it out or made it available to those that can't attend. So I'm wondering if we were to just try recording this one, and then if you are sharing something that you want me to push pause on the record, you can say that, and then I will, or Jennifer will, pause the recording so that piece isn't necessarily captured. That way, I think we could create an environment where at least some of the education piece will be able to spread out and share, and then the personal things that you want to share that you don't want to be recorded, then we just pause it. Is everybody all right with that? And if you're not, please let me know in the chat. You can send me a personal chat, or me and Jennifer a personal chat. But just trying to make this available for those that have to work during this hour and so forth. So, okay, let's go ahead and start with a prayer. Any volunteers? You love that, where you're like, oh man, I don't want to be the one to pray. But if anyone's willing to, that would be awesome. Otherwise, Jennifer or I will. Raise your hand if you're interested. Yes, Maureen, thank you. You're on mute, by the way. There you go.
Thank you. So, dear Lord, just please be with us this hour. Help us to hear what you need us to hear and share what we need to share, to continue to be strong for ourselves and for those we love. And thank you for the leadership of Jason and the folks there to help all of us. We ask all these things in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Okay, so last week we went over let me just show you. Got so many screens open. Let me just back up. If you are just calling in, what I'm doing is I'm showing the collaboration versus confrontation section on page 140 of Unhooked. And I would love for those of you that were on the call last week, just to kind of go back and thread through these principles, because we're building on each week. The week before, we talked about, back up, we talked about making it about them, not us, for the sole purpose of our own peace and our own sanity, while allowing them and empowering them to, you know, evoke their internal motivation to change. But more than that, what we're up against is ego. So every person who struggles with substance use disorder relies on a large amount of ego. And I want to frame it this way because it's really important that family members understand that ego, albeit our enemy, and the natural man, you know, is an enemy to God, or woman, natural woman. When I was in jail, my ego was my survival. When I was homeless, I had to rely on my ego. I had to show bravado. I had to straighten my shoulders and be, you know, overly. I had to overcompensate for my insecurity and my inadequacy and my shame and my self-hatred. And I know that you guys can relate to this in your addicted loved ones, and maybe within yourselves, where when we feel small and we're struggling with self-love and we're struggling with self-respect, and we know that we are, like, if our beliefs about ourselves are that we're the scum of the earth, which a lot of us with substance use disorder feel, then ego is the only way to get through the day. And so it serves as a tool. It's an armor. It's like putting on rhino skin to go out and face life, where you literally feel enmity. You feel separation between the world and yourself. And it's almost like this feeling of the world's out to get me and I can't trust anyone. And the coping of that mentality is getting loaded. And that's how we kind of bring that anxiety down. We kind of bring that fear and put it at bay. But it exacerbates the ego. And the reason why I'm even bringing this up is because everything that we are talking about in terms of strategy, using motivational interviewing technique and skills to communicate with our addicted loved ones, it's in effort to navigate the ego in our loved ones. Because if we are trying to lock horns with our addicted loved one's ego, our level of influence it's like non-existent. You might get compliance for a season, but as I mentioned in weeks past, compliance isn't really the goal. It's a counterfeit version of feeling like we're making a difference, because it makes us feel good when they comply with our rules and they comply with our expectations. It's like, okay, I got my way, and now I don't have to, you know, fear. But it's definitely our way of controlling the outcome. And the issue with navigating the ego is knowing that you're not really navigating your addicted loved one's personality, you're navigating the alter ego, helps put this in context of why trust and rapport are so dang important. Because making it about them, not us, allows their ego to kind of chill and not show up in these conversations as much. It still will, but our reaction to their ego is either going to reinforce their ego or it's going to diminish their ego over time. Or when I say diminish their ego, it's going to allow the walls to come down so that we can make real influential impact. Because real influence happens when there's trust and rapport and not walls of ego, where we're locking horns and wrestling egos. And that's what we do a lot of times out of fear and need for control, and we want our outcome. And all of these principles that we're talking about, making it about them, not us, builds trust and rapport. Tapping into the spirit of motivational interviewing. For those that weren't on the call last week, just want to highlight this. It's more than a set of techniques and intervention skills. There is a spirit or clinical way of being that is sincere, authentic, and genuine. This is the spirit by which others feel understood, heard, and loved no matter what. In this context, you can inspire and motivate. So what we're doing here is we are recognizing that we're dealing with two people with our addicted loved ones. And when I was learning about my ego and recognizing that my own battle within my mind and within my soul was really my spiritual man battling my natural man. It was really the boy inside that was insecure and that was afraid. The real Jason, the one that my parents loved and raised, compared to my alter ego, which was fueled by the disease of addiction and fueled by ego and pride and armor and less than pleasant behaviors and less than pleasant verbal communication to my loved ones. Very self-centered, very self-driven, very self-capture, like I was in self-bondage. And that's what that enmity means in terms of like pride. And that pride was my survival. So here I am as an addicted person, and I've got two voices going on all the time in my mind, and my disease is talking to me, and then my conscience or the spirit is talking to me saying you can do this differently. And so the problem is that the ego and the disease is, the addict voice is so much louder and demands so much more attention than the still small voice of my conscience and personal revelation and guidance by the spirit of recovery. And so when you can see your addicted loved one in that context and validate that they're going through this, and what they say out of this voice might just be that ego. In fact, I had to nickname my ego in my last treatment center in the ranch. I didn't put this in the book, but I think it's really important to bring up that I nicknamed my alter ego so that I could tell who was showing up. And the nickname was Sancho. I'm just going to tell you, if you guys ever see Sancho come up, you can call out Sancho and say, hey, I think Sancho is showing up to this call today. Can we have Jason show up instead? I get teased still from my friends in rehab. After 11 years of being close friends, sometimes they'll tease me that Sancho shows up. And he usually shows up like on the ping pong table when I'm like, I'm the house champion, I'm gonna school you at ping pong, that kind of thing. They'll be like, all right, Sancho. And then I realize, okay, the ego's showing up again. And that's the idea of recovery, is like putting our ego in check. And I had to come to that realization on my own. And so as soon as someone can see the battle going on between my ears and in my heart and validate it, I begin to feel heard. I begin to feel understood. I begin to feel loved. And so in order to foster that kind of relationship, we talked about collaboration versus confrontation. And if you really look at it, collaboration is dancing with the ego rather than wrestling with the ego. I would love to hear a couple takeaways from last week's call. Let me drop this screen share. Who would like, let's see, someone raised their hand. Johnson, let's see, maybe it was for the prayer, but who is?
Yeah, that was me. That was for the prayer, Jason.
Oh, Nanny, hi. Good to see you.
Hi.
One of my favorite people on
Good to see you.
Nanette, were you on last week at all? And do you have any, or even comments about collaboration versus confrontation?
Well, it's funny. Last night, my son and I were watching Lord of the Rings, and I love to compare that with addiction, because you have the character Smeagol, who's also Gollum, and that is exactly what it's like with people in addiction. Gollum is the addicted guy. Smeagol's the sweet guy. And even last night, we were kind of talking about how Frodo befriended him because they needed him as a guide. And he kind of softened up and became more like Smeagol more often rather than Gollum. And anyway, when he finally gets rid of that ring and the melted hot lava, he's free of that, which, like I said, we've kind of always compared that with addiction. But I know even for us as codependents, sometimes our pride gets in the way. Maybe we feel embarrassed. Or I know when I very first found out about my son's addiction, my first son, I felt very embarrassed. I didn't want to tell anybody about it. I tried to hide it. And I finally realized that was my pride. My pride was getting in the way of that. And I finally reached a point where I loved him, who he was, and I learned to love him unconditionally, and I let go of all of that pride. And when my second son, when he came home from his mission and we found out he had an addiction also, it was very different. And it's because I had learned through so much through the recovery world. I treated it very differently. We were very different. And Logan has had a lot of success, and Connor has too, but it's taken us a long time to get to and learn, because knowledge is power, and we have to learn the things that we're doing that help sometimes drive those addictions. So anyway, I'm rambling. I don't know what you're looking for, but.
I'm just looking for your heart and your genuine authenticity, which you just brought. So thank you. That was beautiful. Any other takeaways from last week's topic on collaboration versus confrontation? You could unmute yourselves if you want to just start talking. No takeaways? I'm just gonna wait.
Okay, I'll go.
Yay.
I think the biggest thing I took away was when you said, does your loved one feel loved, heard, and understood? And so when I have conversations with her and I want to throw up my stuff instead of just listening, that's kind of what I've been trying to focus on. Does she feel loved, heard, like I'm really listening and understood? So I really like that. I appreciated that.
Thank you, Amy.
You're welcome.
I wanted to point out that, in my circumstances, part of this group is really to learn, because I'm in a situation where my son is on the streets in Portland, and I'm in Idaho. And, at this point in time, last week, we knew where he was. We knew where his tent was. We knew, I have information on him, but, in October, I got to go to where he was. But last week, when I went to the location, he wasn't there. His tent was gone. I asked, some of the people that were there, if they knew anything, and nobody knew anything. So this has actually been great for me to learn, because I really, as I emailed Jason, I really want to put this into practice, with an opportunity with him. And, God willing, just as I found out where he was before, which was a miracle, an absolute miracle how I found out. I know that in my heart that God can do that again, and get me his location. But I just wanted to tell, thank everybody that's here and sharing, your stories, because actually it's, like I said, I really want to put this into practice.
Thank you so much, Michael. We're all praying for your son too.
Thank you. That's all we have right now.
Yep. Jennifer Chase, do you have any insight on collaboration versus confrontation before we go to the next section of drawing out versus imposing ideas?
Yeah, thanks, Jason. So for me, when I think about this in terms of my own recovery, and then in terms of helping my son walk through his addiction. When I think about confrontation and collaboration, I think of my will and God's will. For me, a lot of the times confrontation comes directly from what I think should happen and what I think my son should do. And if there's more of a collaboration spirit, there's more of an understanding that I don't know what that will is, and I don't know what God's doing in my son's life. And so therefore, there's just a space of collaboration. So that to me has been helpful, because I've spoke with you guys before, right? Like in realizing that so many of my responses came from my own selfish needs and desires as a mom. And what my son's addiction said about me as a mom and a human being, that caused that fear, and that anxiety caused the confrontation. So for me, it's a really clear, it's a clear question that I ask myself in most conversations with him that get a little heated. Because look, my son's 21 and he's an addict, so conversations get heated. And I feel like it is my responsibility in the place that I am in my life to ask myself the question, am I confronting or am I collaborating? And if I'm confronting, it's usually because I'm seeking my will and not God's.
Thank you so much. Hey, Jen, just a follow-up question. When does confrontation work? When is it appropriate? Like, what needs to be there for it to work?
So rapport, trust, a sense of that, all of the reasons that you talked about with MI, right? That they feel heard, that they feel loved, that it's all of those things have to be in place and built before you can be in a confrontational situation with somebody. So up and until that happens, you're just really causing a bigger wedge and making it more difficult to build that rapport in order for you to be influential.
Yes, I couldn't have said it better myself. Essentially, if you are still on the beach and you do not have an emotional raincoat on, I don't recommend confronting. I recommend only confronting when you are off the beach and when you are you're wearing your emotional raincoat and you're practicing these principles that lead and foster to the result of trust and rapport. Because then when you confront, you don't need a particular reaction. You don't necessarily need them to comply or agree, or you're simply communicating a boundary and your wishes, and you're communicating from a place that's objective versus subjective, full of baited fear and emotional booby traps. And it's a big difference. It's a big difference when I'm confronting my family members and when I'm confronting my clients. It's easier to confront my clients because it's objective. It's different when I'm confronting loved ones because there's the emotional piece. And so the work is to get off the beach. How do you get off the beach? And you can go back and review that section in the book. And then how do you put on the emotional raincoat? And remember, it's a choice before it's a feeling. And so you have to choose to put on that emotional raincoat and choose to armor up, and choose to focus on self-mastery versus trying to master your loved one. Self-mastery is where we need to place our attention. And just for a visual purposes, for those of you that are new, this is the idea of self-mastery, is that we create balance in all of these life domains, from relationships and health and finance and career, education, social service, spiritual, so putting the focus back on, God, where am I off balance? Where do I need to place a little attention instead of putting all of your emotions and all of your effort into one or two categories? And maybe that is all of my emotions and all of my passion and emotional and mental bandwidth is going into my work, and then going into trying to help my addicted loved one. Which, if your life domains and you're focusing on those two areas, but some of these others are getting neglected, like your own mental health, your own physical health, your own diet, nutrition, your own altruism and service work, where you're going and feeding the homeless, or you're looking for opportunities to help others out, or if your spiritual walk is off balance, that's where our character defects flare up, and then we tend to confront, we tend to make it about us rather than collaborate, making it about them. And so these are all really important. And then these circles inside these life domains, those represent the stages of change. And the stages of change are another lesson, but basically it's, the process of becoming ready to want to change. And so everything we do here is in effort to evoke internal motivation. Okay, so let's go to the next section. I'm going to share my screen of the book.
Jason, really quickly,
Ah,
Amy has her hand up.
Amy, go ahead.
Oh, just one question on the motivational interviewing. So I find sometimes when I'm asking questions and that I get the response like, and I'm asking like, trying to be understanding or trying to get her perspective. And it's like, stop being my therapist. And that pushback, like, really, Mom, like, I don't need, you're like, I don't need you to be my therapist. And so I'm finding it hard to do the interviewing part and try to draw her sometimes when you're getting that pushback. And I'm not telling her anything. I'm just really asking. Like she was telling me, like, for instance, the other day that somebody really upset her and she didn't go off. It was actually her roommate that had said something really ugly and she's impatient and she didn't go off or whatever. And she stayed calm. And so I was trying to like, well, how did that feel afterwards? You know, like, you know, and trying to draw that out of her. And she's like, oh, Mom, stop being the therapist. So that's what I get a lot.
Yeah, I think every single one of us can relate to that. It's like they want you to listen to them, but do it in a way that they, you know, do it their way rather than how you're doing it. So stay tuned because we're going to get into rolling with resistance, and that alone encompasses a lot, but there's also a like in context, remember, like when they're sharing something with you and you're asking questions, you're building trust and rapport, and then her ego is saying, don't get close. And so her ego shows up and throws up resistance and says, don't be my therapist, which is to push you away. And so you can see how those personalities are at play within her. And so when you spot it, that's where you just roll with it. And
Okay.
all the while you can reinforce your own boundaries, and you don't have to subject yourself to being a doormat either in those conversations. You know what I mean? Like if someone, and I'm not using your example, but if someone in that situation comes to you and dumps all their stuff on you and they expect you to just be their toilet or dumpster and just leave it on you, and they don't want any response or feedback, well, I think that's a great get off the beach experience by saying, hey, time out. Before you share with me all of this stuff, I just want to know, like, are you going to give me permission to give my perspective? Are you going to give me permission to ask questions? Or is this just you just vomiting on me because I'm not a dumping ground? And that's a healthy way where we can set up our own boundaries to say, hey, this isn't all on your terms either, but just know, like, I love you and I want to hear what you have to say. But at the same time, I don't want to be treated poorly for asking questions, and I don't want to be treated poorly for engaging in a dialogue with you. If you're bringing the dialogue to me, you know, I want to feel like my opinion is valid too. And if you don't want my feedback, well, then you know, this is okay with me, this isn't okay with me, type of an arrangement. So as you get better at this, you'll be able to set those kinds of boundaries, which is a form of confrontation in the context of unconditional love and positive regard, and also letting them know that you love them no matter what, but you love yourself enough to say, don't treat me that way. You know, I'm not a doormat. It's not okay for you to talk to me that way, type of thing. And you don't have to do that by escalating it. You can do that in the spirit of MI. I do it all the time with clients that start attacking me or Brick House. And I know that's not, it's not personal, you know what I mean? They're just, their ego's showing up. But my job is to shut the ego down while honoring the person and while loving the person and empowering the person to get stronger than the ego. And that's not easy. And it's a practice. And sometimes I do it well, sometimes I don't do it well. Sometimes I react poorly, sometimes I react better. So let's go to, great question, by the way. More to come on that with rolling with resistance. Okay, drawing out versus imposing ideas. Can I get a volunteer to read? can't see everybody's face. Let's go ahead with Scott Baldwin, and then Scott, if you want to pass it to Connie after you're done reading, you can pass it to Connie Karcher.
Sure, I was just raising my hand. I don't know whether you saw it or not.
I kind of like, I have
Okay.
6 of you on my top of my screen, and so I have to like scroll through to see. So I apologize. Jennifer can help.
Jason, I just want to ask how you're feeling. How do you feel?
Today, I'm feeling good.
Yeah.
Are you referring to the surgery?
Yeah.
I'm feeling good. Thanks for asking. For those of you that don't know, I had an emergency appendectomy a week ago last Saturday, and it was painful. It did not erupt, but I'm sober, and it was a trial, but I'm good.
Well, that's good to hear.
Thanks for asking.
Where do you want me to stop then?
Why don't you just go until you feel like passing it to Connie? We have, let's see, this section is a page and a half. So if you want to read a couple paragraphs and pass it.
So we're going to individual versus authority?
Yeah, that's where we'll go.
Okay.
Can you see the screen?
As addicted, tired of hearing what we should do and what we must do. As a result, our resistance strengthens instead of our recovery. Damagingly, this occurs even though the suggestions are probably constructive, just like what happened at my first court-ordered rehab. The best way to help influence another person is by cultivating their own ideas for change. People support what they help create and not what they're told to do. Unless your addicted loved one is clearly in pre-contemplation about his destructive behavior, the truth is he has his own reasons to want to change. Furthermore, he has the ability, although he may not believe he does, to co-create a plan for lasting change. In the rooms of recovery, we are taught that no human power can relieve us of our alcoholism and that we must rely on a higher power. Try to accept that you are not your loved one's higher power, but that you can be an instrument in drawing out sufficient motivation and inspiration from within him to discover his greatness. What are you doing? What you are doing is moving from instructing and lecturing your loved one to drawing out his own ideas. As you do this, it will illuminate a path to a brighter future in recovery. This brighter path will be attractive to him because it is his idea, not someone else's path for him. Okay, Connie.
Oh, Connie,
You're
you're
on
muted.
mute.
Sorry.
No, you're good.
Each time I faced a big problem in my early weeks of sobriety, I was given a wonderful therapeutic suggestion. Instead of getting a bunch of advice, I was invited to sit quietly, ponder the problem, and seek solutions through thoughtful prayer and inspiration. If the answer doesn't come immediately, I practice patience, which is also an attribute I need consistent work on. To this day, it amazes me how often and quickly the answers come when I simply sit and ask for help and clarity in prayer. This process can work for you and for your addicted loved one because it honors our own abilities, gifts, and talents, increasing our motivation for continued growth, even through life's toughest challenges. The word inspire means to breathe life into something. If someone is inspired, they experience an increase of motivation to act. To encourage means to give someone courage. When we inspire and encourage others, we breathe life and courage into their spirit. It's a wonderful gift to share, and we can do this by simply shifting from telling someone what to do to drawing upon their God-given gifts, good hearts, and their intrinsic abilities to transcend. Rather than imposing your opinion on your addicted loved one, try understanding his thoughts and feelings about change. This process is amazingly powerful. Both parties are willing to engage in the exploration of solutions. In all my experiences with an addiction, a person in long-term recovery And as a treatment provider, commitment to change is most powerful and durable when it comes from within the addicted person, not through a series of should and must statements. Ultimately, lasting change is more likely to occur when he discovers his own reasons and determination to change. Our job is to draw out or evoke his own motivations and skills for change. This creates the foundation for powerful change within you and in the near future for your addicted loved one.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Connie, what are your thoughts about that?
I've experienced it both ways. Getting better at doing it this way and the other way, where you just totally feel like you have to figure out every detail of his life and set it up for him and have him do it. You know, I have found that when I've given it a chance, my son's come up with some of his own solutions, and it surprised me. They were things that I hadn't thought of, and so that was a good reinforcer. For example, well, just like putting supports in place for himself, he, like a certain counselor or a meeting or something around here, it just does that make sense? It really can work. It's like it's like they'll share more with you. It's not blocked, like they're just shutting down against your trying to tell them what to do.
Yeah. Again, it's navigating the ego and your loved one inside.
Yeah. It's a relief too. I mean, think about it. They're an expert on their own addiction. We're not. So you trust that. And I mean, just look at Jason, right? I mean, trust that. Look at all you went through, and it just, there's always hope. They'll come up with what works for them.
Yeah. Thank you, Connie.
Sorry, I didn't mean that as, I hope you didn't take any offense. I've been rereading your book, so it's fresh in my mind.
I put on my emotional raincoat before this call, so I'm good.
Okay.
No, I have pretty thick skin. But yeah, I loved everything you said, Connie. That is so poignant and powerful. Every word. Scott Baldwin, what was your takeaway from that section? Imposing or drawing out versus imposing ideas, which is really hard because we're great advice givers. We know what's best for our addicted loved one, especially when their life is crap and they have no money and they're living homeless and they're in and out of jail and they're losing everything and then they're calling us and they need $10. Like, that's life sucks.
How did you know this was our life the last 24 hours? You basically just recapped the last 24 hours here. Yeah, you know what, Jason? Ro and I have, along with our son, gone through these stages of change numerous times. To what degree of action our son Nick was in when he was trying to get sober is debatable. But it's ended in relapse after relapse after relapse for many, many years. And I can say that collaboration is definitely a recurring theme that I hear. Even yesterday when I was talking to him and giving him my input as to what I thought he should do, he said, "Dad, if you call to lecture me, then don't." And it's hard not to do because, as I forget who said it earlier, You're worried about being in control of your own emotions as to taking care of your own emotions and letting the chips fall where they may as far as your son or daughter is concerned, or your loved one. So, right now we're in the, it appears that our son is not in any other than active use, any other stage other than active using right now. And we have to try to keep our raincoat on and manage it the best we can. But this is when it comes to talking about based on what we think makes the most sense, but definitely recommending turns into lecturing, turns into pushback, turns into fights, and none of that is healthy.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much, Scott. I remember Jennifer Chase. By the way, am I cutting in and out, Jen? Am I okay?
Right now you're okay. You have a little bit, but it's not horrible.
Okay, I just switched my internet. Jen, I remember you talked about this 2 weeks ago when your son approached you for money. And what I loved about that example is that through your reaction to him when he asked you for money, was this idea of drawing out his own solution, drawing out his own, challenging him to not be helpless and being innovative and creative with his own reasons for changing his situation, rather than giving a lot of financial advice and imposing a bunch of, rules and whatnot. And I'd love for you to just recap that.
Yeah, I mean, there's the financial piece. There's also, things that have come up. So he's in sober living right now and he hates it. And at the beginning of this process for him, he would call, sometimes daily, but for sure weekly, and tell me how much he hates it and everybody sucks and the house manager is horrible and, the whole thing. And for a while, I sort of owned it for him, right? Like I listened to it. I partook in his sort of conversation. And what I realized, and something that we do at Brick House with our clients, is ask the questions. What do you want? And how can I help you get there? Right? So I'm putting it back onto him. And what I did with the sober living situation is I said to him, buddy, I want to help you in any way that I can. You need to come to me with the solution and how I can help and what you want. And I can say, much like the money situation that I talked about a couple of weeks ago, I haven't had that conversation in weeks, because he knows every time he brings it up with me that I'm going to go back to him and say, buddy, what's the solution? What do you want? And how can I help you get there? But I am not going to create the scenario for him, because if I create it, it's not going to be right. And if I create it, there's going to be resentments and resistance. So the ability, so not only with the money, but in so many aspects, it's like, put it back and say, what do you want? And how can I help you get there? Not the question is not, do I help you get there by paying for it or doing it or calling the people that need to be called. That's not the question of how can I help you get there. It's how can I be of support to you rather than doing it for you. And my experience with that is, now that he has bought into it himself, he gets to own the consequences of his decision. There's no ability for him to put that back on me and say, well, you told me to do that and it didn't work out, and now I have resentments towards you. What I have found is when I put it back on him, he's come to me and said, yeah, that didn't work out. I want to do it in a different way. that decision, that wasn't a good decision. And it's hard at the time because I have always wanted to fix it for him. I have always wanted to make the landing softer. I have always wanted my son to have the best possible life known to man. And so it was really a mourning period of realizing that that's not my role as his mom. My role as his mom is to empower him to make decisions, empower him to feel consequences, and take that relationship of confrontation rather than collaboration out of our rapport and relationship. I don't know if that answered your question exactly, but that has been so helpful for me. And even with clients, just asking the question, what do you want and how do I help you get there?
Now, if he would have come to you, Jen, and said, okay, Mom, I want you to help me with $100. And I know, like, I'm going to spend the whole week going out and getting my applications out there. I'm going to get a job and I'm going to pay you back next week. That's my solution. Then where do you go?
The conversation I would have is, buddy, we're going to need to, I love that you're thinking about the future and what that's going to look like for you. Unfortunately, your dad and I aren't going to be able to give you any money, so that you're going to have to go find the job, save money. And then that's when you start that process of finding something new, somewhere new to live.
Mom, I can't believe you don't love me. I can't believe you're treating me like this. You know, I'm just going to be out in the cold and by myself. This is BS. What's your reaction?
My go-to answer in 9 out of 10 of those kinds of situations is, I'm sorry you feel that way.
Yeah, you should validate.
End of sentence. No response after that.
Yeah. I'm sorry you feel that way. I love you. Maybe we should talk when you're a little less emotional or you're a little less heated. Which is a great way to get off the beach in that moment and empower them to come to their own solutions. You guys remember the scenario when I went to my dad and I said, Dad, I need $100 or my dealers are going to kill me. And I had tears in my eyes and the whole works. And I thought I could draw upon his fear response. And he said, Jason, you will never see another dime out of your mother or me. I hope they don't hurt you too badly, but I love you. And I responded with less than pleasant remarks. And he didn't react. He just ended the conversation, and I went on my way. And I went and stole someone's weed whacker and went and pawned it, because I didn't need money to pay off my dealer. I needed drugs. But my dad was off the beach at that moment. And guess what? That was the last time I went to him, which was huge. He was so grateful that I stopped going to him for money. Because before, when I'd go to him and my mom for money, they would have a long lecture and then they would give me the money. But they'd give me the money after they gave me a long lecture of how I needed to do better with my money and how I needed to manage it and so I knew if I endured their lecture, I would still get the money. And it wasn't until they stopped the lecturing and stopped giving me the money, stopped imposing their ideas on me, I began to move through the stages of change faster, because the pain got greater. The discomfort got greater. So, any other takeaways from imposing ideas versus drawing out? Let's go to Linda, and then let's go to Nanette.
One thing that I noticed coming through the process, and I was really, I probably got an A in the way of, I'll fix it for you. I know what you can do when you come. What am I going to do? I would tell him exactly. Well, my husband and I both, we knew the answers to these things. And one thing that I found that's really helped is I looked at it when we talked just recently, when we were talking about trust. So he lost trust in me when I only talked to him about what's going on in your life. Are you going to meetings? Are you taking your medication? So until I stopped doing that, he had no reason to trust me, because he knew I was gonna, he knew what my motivations were to control him and his addiction. And the other piece of trust that came to building rapport is what Jennifer mentioned earlier. At that point, I then had to back away and trust his higher power to take care of him. And that's always the biggest challenge for me. And so, but I understand now that until I stop trying to give him the answers and control him, he doesn't trust me any more than I would trust him. And so, because he knows what my motivations are. And when we started changing that and using that and backing off the beach, I noticed the last time when he did relapse and call, and we just said, we're so sorry to hear that. We're going to pray for you. And then he said something he's never said before, which was, thanks for not judging me. So it's changing. But that trust piece is really big. It's that he's got to trust me, and I've got to trust his higher power, and I've got to trust my higher power. And then we can build rapport, and then we can collaborate. And he tells me what he needs to tell me, but not what I need him to tell me. So all of this is so good for me. Thanks.
I love it, Linda. And round of applause for you, not because of the outcome that you got, but just your practice of these principles and seeing how is it helping you feel more peace regardless of what he does or doesn't do?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. There's no question about it. Because I think he really does believe now that we are not going to rescue him when he relapses, that we are not going to run over there and, cook for him and help him detox. And he now understands that. And so he didn't call this last time. He only called when he's telling me, I relapsed, I'm detoxing now. And we said, would you call us when you're feeling better, when you're finished? And he did. That's how it went, which was totally different than before, because we'd enable him each time. We'd stay on the phone with him. We'd, basically making sure he detoxed. And then all together say, okay, here's what you got to do. Did you call this guy? Did you call, who's your sponsor? We can't do it.
Yeah. So
there wasn't any trust when he knew that we were just going to ask him questions and try to get information and to help us feel better about ourselves.
Yeah.
So yeah, it brings a lot of peace. It honestly really brings a lot of peace.
That's awesome. And using that metaphor that I brought up in weeks past, it's really like this process is about creating that pocket of peace in the middle of the storm, regardless of how bad things get with your addicted loved one, so that you can have that bubble of protection, knowing that you're working on the right things and you're operating on correct principles that will have it has higher odds of reaping the result that you desire, rather than trying to control the outcome and actually manifesting the opposite of what you desire, which is more resistance, more pushback, more obstinance, and less change. So love it. Okay, Nanette.
I was just thinking this has been several years ago, but Connor, when he had left your treatment and we had sent him to St. George, his paycheck hit the mail or bank, and he knew that, and he fled treatment again. He took a bus and went to Las Vegas. He thought that sounded like a great idea. And I got a phone call. Mom, I'm in Vegas. I blew all my money on a hotel and drugs. And now what am I going to do? And we had done everything. We didn't give him money. He didn't have his own phone. And the way he was calling me, he actually went up to the hotel desk and said, can I use your phone? But he was calling me And I just said, I'm so sorry. This is so hard for you. But you got yourself into this. You've got to get yourself out of it. And as a mother, that was so hard. And he said, but I don't have any money left. I don't have a car. I don't have a phone. And I could hear the desperation in his voice. So I just had to kind of powwow with him for a minute, say, well, what can you do? You got yourself down there. How can you get back? And he said, well, I don't know. I don't have any money. I said, well, do you know anybody in Vegas? And there was an old football coach that had moved down there. And I said, well, maybe you could call him and he'd give you a ride somewhere. So he said, well, I don't have his number. And I did give him the number. Long story short, he did make it back to treatment. But it's because I just kind of just let him sit in his own poopy diaper. You know, that's kind of what you have to do. They have to learn that they don't like sitting in that. And anyway, we kind of learn as we go too. One of the things I wanted to say sometimes too, if we don't have the answers right away, you don't have to answer right away. You can say, let me think about that. You know, I'll get back to you, you know. There was one time I had been praying about him because, like I said, we had taken away everything. No phone, no money. He didn't have a car. And we were at the bottom, and I had been praying to my Father in heaven, what in the world, what can I do? And I remembered when he was a little boy, he would have these terrible temper tantrums. And the only thing that helped was taking away privilege. And we had taken away all of his privileges. But I finally told him, Connor, you know, and I told him about this, what I had prayed for and what came to my mind. And I said, the only privilege I can think of that's left that we haven't taken away from you is us. So I said, until you can figure this out, you no longer can have your family. So I said, don't call me until you're in recovery. And just so you guys that don't know me know, he had been in sober living homes. He'd been homeless on the street. This had been about 5 years into this, where he'd tried about everything. But when I finally put my foot down and, you know, said, I'm not taking any calls or anything, totally banned him from his family, that's when he really sought treatment for himself and really moved forward on his own. So,
that is such a powerful and empowering story, because how's your son doing now?
He's doing well. It's still obviously a work in progress, but he's been in recovery and he's working on it. Right now he is taking some classes for anxiety and depression, because he realizes that's part of the reason he relapses, because he gets such depression and anxiety. It's easier to use than to sit in that. So now he's trying to learn to deal with that. But, you know, we're learning too, we're growing too. And like I said, knowledge is power. That's all we can do. We can all just keep learning.
How many years have you been working on getting off the beach, using that metaphor? But I know you started that process before you read it.
I told John that this year it's been a decade. We're into this a decade. But as I said, with my first child at the beginning, we were a mess. We didn't know what we were doing. He was still in our home. We eventually had to kick him out of the home. We went through, you know, a lot of things. Like I said, it's been a decade. But my second son, when he came home from his mission and we found out he had an addiction too, we were so different. There wasn't as much, you know, there wasn't the anger or the hurt. We had put on our emotional raincoats. We knew that he was in pain. He was hurting. We totally treated him different, and he's doing well. He's off at college, and he's thriving and doing well. They both are. So, but like I said, we're still working on ourselves every day. We all are.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you. That was powerful. I just wanted one quick thing. Our counselor, recently, our son's counselor, he actually said this. He's 26, and he said the adults are making all the decisions about where he was going to go next, the rehab and all this. So he didn't even see himself as an adult. You know, it's like that struck me. So that was like right in our face. You just really have to let go of, let them take ownership of it, I think.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
that really struck me.
It's powerful, and I'm going to wrap up with this. The more we impose our ideas on other people where we're not given permission to, if they're not asking for our ideas or our advice, one of the results is learned helplessness. Similar to how Jennifer described the situation with her son and how Nanette described the situation with her son in Vegas. The more we jump in and rescue and solve while imposing our ideas, we're teaching them that anytime they have a problem, they are dependent on someone else's ideas and solutions. And so I know a lot of adult children who come into treatment that don't know how to function as an adult. They're like 12-year-olds in adult bodies because they've always had everything figured out for them. And so allowing them to draw out their own ideas for solution and change is teaching them to not be helpless. Because one of the biggest defaults to go back to using drugs and alcohol, remember, drugs and alcohol are the solution for them, not the problem. And so they turn to the solution when they can't manage adulthood. They can't manage life. They don't know how to navigate paying bills. They don't know how to navigate juggling stress. It's a stress response disease. So the higher the stress, the more likely the anxiety and the more likely the triggers and the more likely the cravings. And it's only a matter of time before we use when that's on board. And so helping them draw out their own ideas for change is in large part related directly to self-efficacy. And self-efficacy is the confidence within themselves that they can do it, that they can stay sober. Because if they don't have the confidence that they can live life sober, they're going to always revert back to what works, which is check out, escape, avoid, and ignore and procrastinate change. And it's not like they don't want to change. My guess is that in their mind, they're like, okay, next week I'm going to get sober, or tomorrow I'll get sober, or on my birthday, or on January 1st, I'm going to get sober. And then they get there and then they throw the stick further. That was my story for years. It's like, I'm going to change, I'm going to get sober, but I can't today. I'll do it tomorrow. It's just this constant perpetual throwing the stick out so that I could feel good, like I was moving towards change. And that's classic contemplation, classic contemplation, where I didn't want to get sober yet, but I didn't want to keep using either. And so I would set these goals. So I'm going to wrap up right now. I have another meeting to jump into, but I will send this recording out. And thank you for joining. Let's jump on again next week. I will be in a different place next week, but I'm excited to join and do this. So, yeah, love you guys. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks. Glad